Hey there, storytellers, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me creating a book wish list. I saw this video initially over on Jesse the Reader's channel. I'll link his original video down below, but essentially he created a list of books that wasn't a hard cut TBR, but books he did eventually want to get around to, sort of a what am I going to look for in the future kind of book list, if you will. Essentially, he picked a main theme for all the books to fall under, and then he picked a main sort of challenge and then had smaller challenges within that main challenge. For example, his was about sports, so he picked sports books and then they each met different criterias within the main challenge of sports books. For my theme, I am going to go with reimaginings of classic novels. I enjoy the classics probably more than most people who had to read them in school. I think a majority of people read them, did their best with them, and then tried to forget about them. I really enjoy classics, and I really enjoy reimaginings of classics, similar to how you'd view like a reimagining of a classic movie. For example, A Cinderella Story was a more modern take on Cinderella the fairy tale. Things like that. So broadly, I'm going to say reimaginings or modern adaptations of classic novels. Within that theme, my main challenge is going to be similar to the one in Jesse's original video, which is that each book I pick to fit the list of criteria has to be a reimagining of a different classic. For example, I'm not going to pick two reimaginings of Pride and Prejudice. Within that main challenge, I'm going to find a book I've heard of before, a book I've never heard of, a reimagining of a classic book with a fantasy twist, a backlisted book, and then an upcoming release. So we shall see what I figure out. Let's get right to it. To kick things off, I'm just going to start out by searching reimaginings of classic novels. Let's see what I get. Oh, we also have retellings. That might be yeah, that's probably a better way to search for it. So let's go with retellings of classic novels, just to make my search a little bit easier. And let's just go with classic retellings books on Goodreads. Okay, so the first category is a book I've heard of before. So on this list, I've heard of a few. Circe, I've heard of. Cinder from the Lunar Chronicles, I've heard of. Heartless, I've heard of. Let's see. Study in Charlotte, I've heard of. There's quite a few that I've heard of, but let's go. I'm gonna go back up. Let's go with, I think I'm gonna go with Cinder from the Lunar Chronicles. Cinder by Marissa Meyer is a reimagining or retelling of Cinderella the fairy tale, which I think for this experiment can qualify as a classic, as fairy tales are pretty well known. It follows Cinder, who is a cyborg in the future streets of New Beijing, and she's a second-class citizen, and she's being blamed by her stepmother for her stepsister's illness, but her life gets intertwined with a prince, and she goes on an epic journey. I know this is a futuristic sci-fi sort of retelling, which is interesting because I don't usually gravitate towards those things, but I have heard of it. I have thought about reading it several occasions, so I think I'm gonna go with that to fulfill the book I have heard of before category. To fill category 2, book I've never heard of before, I think I'm going to look for a modern retelling, but I think I'm also going to target my search. I am interested in finding a modern retelling of Macbeth. For the modern retelling of Macbeth that I found, it's called As I Descended by Robin Talley, and it features a gender-bent main character called Maria, and she can talk to ghosts, and normally that doesn't really scare her or anything, but one day when she's playing with a Ouija board, she gets a message that she's going to kill one of her classmates, and cue a few shenanigans and bad choices a la original Macbeth, and some things go down that are very unexpected. I didn't read too much because I don't want to spoil everything for myself, but I think it's really cool. It looks like it also has some queer representation, which I'm all about, so I think I'm gonna go with As I Descended to fill my category 2 requirement of a book I've never heard of before. For book number 3, I'm obviously looking for a retelling of a classic with a fantasy twist. So we'll search fantasy retellings of classic novels. An interesting fantasy version of a retelling of a classic novel is Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim, and it is a retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo, which is one of the classics that I really, really enjoy. It is one of my favorite classics. So, in addition to this being a retelling, it is also gender bent, which means our main character is a girl, and she is a servant on a debtor's ship, a prison ship basically, and she's getting ready, she's working her way towards freedom, but then she rescues a drowning man and her sentence gets extended, and the man she rescues offers her the option to become a lady in order to escape and ensnare some bad guys, as per the original novel. But this sounds cool. It's sort of a piratey meets Lady Victorian England. I'm not sure exactly what time period it's set in, but it sounds like a fun retelling, so I think I'm going to go with this one to fulfill my fantasy quotient. The next one is a little bit hard for me, only because I'm not sure how to define exactly what a backlist book is. I would assume it is a book that has been out and published for a while. It's not a newer publication, if you will. So I'm just gonna look for something that has been out for a while. I found one that intrigues me. It's called Never Never by Brianna R. Schrum. And it is a Peter Pan retelling set from Captain Hook's perspective. So basically, Captain Hook is brought to Neverland by Peter Pan, and the appeal of never growing up is always there, but he wants to return to his world, and Peter won't take him back, so that sort of creates their rivalry, which sounds like an interesting take. I just don't know exactly when it was published, so let's head on over to Goodreads to find out if I can consider Never Never a backlisted book. Published in September of 2015. That's 5 years ago. I would not consider 5 years ago a particularly new publication. It's certainly not as old as it could be, but it's not really new either. So we're gonna go with Never Never by Brianna Schrum to fulfill my backlist book requirement. For my last category and upcoming release, I decided to look for retellings of Arthurian legend because I am an absolute fiend for King Arthur retellings. So I'm going to see if I can find a new one. Okay, so I found finally my last book, the upcoming release. It's called Legendborn by Tracy Dion, and it is a sort of contemporary fantasy modern retelling of Arthurian legend, but in a really unique kind of way. This 16-year-old named Bree doesn't want anything to do with her life, her past life after her mother dies, so she goes off to this sort of special program for high schoolers, and she ends up being part of a secret society called the Legendborn, and they're basically reincarnations of King Arthur, and there's a teenage mage who is a Merlin. From what it seems like, there's not one specific Arthur or one specific Merlin or anything like that. It's a society of people, which is pretty interesting. One thing that really stands out to me about this is A, our main character is a girl, and B, she's black. So I think that's a really good place to end off on. I think that's really exciting. I've never seen a retelling of Arthurian legend. I don't know if I've ever seen a retelling where the sort of main character, who is sort of this reincarnation or reimagining of Arthur, is not only a girl but a black girl. So that's very exciting to me. I've never seen that done, and I'm ready to, so I'm gonna get on that one right away because I don't usually hesitate on Arthurian retellings. I just love them that much. That is it for my bookish wish list. Ooh, tongue twister a little bit there. If any of these books caught your interest, or if there were books that you would have used to fill the categories differently than I am and you'd like to recommend them to me, please do let me know down in the comments. I'd be super excited to get some more books sort of on my list, especially if you can find retellings, really good ones, of Arthurian legend, Macbeth, or The Count of Monte Cristo. All of those are ones I absolutely love and never get tired of as overall stories and theming in novels. So if you can find me some of those, please do. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like down below, and don't forget you can click the subscribe button if you'd like to keep up with me and all of my bookish adventures, and you can always ring the little bell so that you don't miss a beat. I will see you guys next time. Bye!